Hello everyone, and welcome to this video talking about Aristophanes' assemblywomen. So my name is Claire Rowan. I work at the University of Warwick, and I'd like to introduce Mary Jakakaki, an honorary research fellow at Warwick who works on tokens in Athens. And what we wanted to do today in this video is to talk about a particular passage of the assemblywomen. And this is where the women have all gathered together, they've dressed up as men, and they're about to head off to the assembly. And they say, we need to try and get there early to get our 3 obols. And then when we've got our token, we have to try and sit close together so that we can improve all the measures that our friends need. And so what we want to do today is to delve into this passage to really explore what Aristophanes is doing here, what he's referencing, and the archaeology that reveals what's happening here.
Yes.
So I'd like to begin, Mary, by
Yes, me too.
by asking you what makes the text of the assemblywomen so important when we're studying the way the Athenians assembly operated.
Because it is an almost a contemporary source of the introduction of tokens as evidence for assembly pay. It is an almost contemporary source because assembly pay should have been introduced almost immediately after the end of the Peloponnesian War. And if we consider that the assemblywomen were first produced in the late 390s, then the assemblywomen are almost 10 years, roughly 10 years away from this very event.
So when Aristophanes talks about the women getting a token, this is a relatively new phenomenon.
Yes, and he makes a fun of it, not just with these verses, also in other instances, because there is another character in Aristophanes who is lamenting the fact that he did not wake up early, he did not appear early enough at the assembly entrance, so he missed his tokens, and therefore no money to make his everyday shopping, no money. It is 3 obols. 3 obols, and then it rose. It rose. We very well know that it rose to 9 obols. 9 obols is 1.5 drachma, meaning that there was not enough interest from the part of the Athenians in attending the assembly, and the assembly pay was the motive to attract the Athenians to the assembly.
But you had to get there on time to get paid. You couldn't turn up late. This is the problem.
Very early in the morning, before dawn.
Oh, wow.
Before dawn. There is a reason for that. There is a reason for that because only the first 6,000 karmes would get the token. The rest would get no money, nothing.
And so these tokens, which in Greek are called symbola, what was their purpose actually in the Athenian assembly?
To control entrance. The Athenian city-state is a face-to-face society. People knew each other by face. There were magistrates controlling the entrance. They did not need to check against the register. They knew each other by face. But the important thing is that the persons who arrived there got their payment, their indemnity at the end of the day. So
you arrived, you got a token, and then at the end of the day, you hand in your token to get paid.
Yes, this is one of the reasons. One of the reasons is so that you get paid, so that you do not lose your money. And at the same time, the city-state had its quorum. A quorum was needed so that the assembly is ratified, that the assembly has the right to vote and make decisions. Then 6,000 citizens were the minimum required. But there is also another thing that tokens made sure that the citizens would sit randomly and not where they wished to sit. So if a citizen or a group of citizens had in mind to this is again from Aristophanes. This is something that we learn from the text of Aristophanes. The women folk actually they do a conspiracy. Their plan is to sit close together and vote whatever they like. But this is not how democracy works. This is like in Aristophanes and the assembly women, they try to overturn the constitution. They want to have their own constitution, the female constitution. But in truth, the Athenian city-state, especially immediately after the Peloponnesian War, they wanted to protect democracy by ensuring that each citizen would sit random. It was possible to avoid conspiracies, to protect the constitution, to avoid instances when the public would or the participants would shut down the orator, because there were such cases of conspirators sitting close together and manipulating the outcome or driving the discussion in the assembly to the direction they wanted to have things. So this is a true democracy, and its token was a letter token, meaning that the assembly participant would sit randomly on the bench that he was assigned to sit to. And I say he because only men, in truth, only men were allowed to the assembly. So we have two or three main purposes for the tokens. Control of entrance. This was a face control. Then it was to ensure that they would get the payment at the end of the day. And finally, it was so that they sit randomly and the constitution would be protected. There is also more to it, but I can't wait to hear your questions.
Yes. And then they would give out 6,000 tokens, and when all the tokens were taken, they would know then 6,000 people were in the assembly and that everything was for it.
Yes.
Perfect.
And stop distribution. They had 6,000 tokens. The magistrates, they distributed these 6,000 tokens, and that was it.
Great. So you mentioned the letters on these tokens, and that whatever letter you got told you where to sit. Were there any other aspects of the design of these tokens that contributed to the practice of the assembly? And what types of pictures or scenes do we find on these tokens?
Yes. The imagery derives from the demes, from the tribes, and also from the civic realm in general, from politics, from religion. We possess quite a few tokens, and so we can be sure that probably tokens were distributed per tribe, and there were tribal tokens. For example, tribe Hippothontis had a nice mare suckling a child, and this was the foundation myth of the tribe Hippothontis. And there are so many other interesting images. For example, herms, very sophisticated herms, and as you may know that herms were erected in the course of the 6th and the 5th century BC everywhere in the Athenian city-state, and they marked the civic space, the public space against the private space. The herms had a very powerful political role. They signified the active participation of the citizens.
And so, what was the role of the Council of 500 in relation to the assembly?
The Council of 500, at all probability, the magistrates distributing the symbola, as tokens were called, came from the Council of 500. It was a committee coming from the Council of 500. They stood at the assembly entrance. And of course, in the course of the assembly meeting, they presided over the meeting. They had prepared the agenda to discuss, and also they had drafted the laws and the decrees to be put for voting.
Mm. And how did the use of Symbol help in controlling the public expenditure of the assembly?
Yes, this is the fourth role of the tokens here, because the Athenian city-state became increasingly conscious in regards to money spending in the final years and immediately after the Peloponnesian War, and also during the 4th century BCE. Given the fact that there was a budget, the Athenian city-state, like every modern city-state, had its own budget, and money were allotted to treasuries for spending purposes. So the assembly treasury had its own budget. And given the money they had to make 6,000 shares out of the budget. They could control very well the money, the available money. So corroboration for this fact gives us also an inscription. It's a decree coming from a city in Asia Minor. The city is Iasos, 4th century BCE, and that says clearly, for this month, for every month, we have this sum of money should be allotted for the assembly pay. And this is the case, obviously, also in Athens. Tokens essentially as objects, already from the Neolithic period, are counting objects. Objects used for calculation, counting. So they helped calculate how much money was available and the distribution of this money.
So because without the token, you couldn't get entry to the assembly and you couldn't get paid. So this way they could control how much money they gave out. And I mean, so there's a recent kind of newly discovered lot of clay tokens from a place in Athens called the Museion Hill.
Yes.
What's the significance of this discovery?
Yes, the significance of the discovery is that this is a coherent lot of approximately 80 pieces of lettered clay tokens. Up to this was discovered fairly recently because it was hidden in the depots of the Numismatic Museum in Athens and was lost in obscurity for several decades. A lot of lettered clay tokens. The study of these tokens shows clearly that we had a series of 50 different lettered series. We had an issue of 50 different lettered series. The 24 letters of the alphabet plus the sum P, an archaic letter form that became obscure in the classical period. And then these 25 characters were doubled because some of the tokens bear double letters. I mean that the letter in double lines.
Yes, an alpha, for instance, with 2 lines, not just one.
Yes. Beta is in 2 lines written, gamma in 2 lines written. All the 25 characters, the 24 letters of the alphabet plus the sum P in double lines, meaning that we have 50 different pieces. And this makes a very nice divider for the 6,000 participating citizens, the quorum. Therefore, these are the lettered benches of the assembly that we hear from the inscriptions and other literary sources. Also, Hansen in Copenhagen has written extensively how the Athenians sat in the assembly, has written extensively on that. So this is important to us because it proves that the Athenians did not sit randomly in the assembly, excuse me, they did sit randomly in the assembly, and this was a measure to protect democracy against potential conspirators. There is a powerful analogy to that, and the powerful analogy is the Juros courts. The Juros courts functioned also with lettered tokens, this time bronze letter tokens, but here the series comprises only of 25 different characters, meaning we have only 25 different segments, because a Juros panel is far smaller. A Juros panel can be maximum 1001 members, 1001 for obvious reason, so as to acquit or vote guilty someone. But
there can't be a hung jury with 1001. One side will always win.
Yes, one side has to win in the Juros courts, and there the Juros panel is much smaller than the quorum of the assembly. The assembly therefore had 50 different segments to sit, while so it fits very well. This was a very, very nice find, the Museion Hill. The Museion Hill, as such, meaning the Hill of the Muses, is located between the Agora and the Pnyx, the assembly place. Also, the fine spot speaks for itself. It was lost by the possibly by the councillors, while the councillors were moving from the Agora to the Pnyx in order to prepare a place, in order to prepare the place for the meeting.
Oh, really interesting. So in these few lines of Aristophanes, actually behind them, there's a whole system of democracy and decision making and tokens and
equality before the law, and also it is moving to see how the Athenians protected their own democracy, and also that they were very conscious about money spending. Democracy has to do also with money. A poor state cannot run a democracy, and there is and I would like to close with that a successful state means a state that first it's a democracy, and at the same time, and second, it is successful in finance. This makes a state successful in democracy, successful in finances. That made Athens so powerful in antiquity.
Thank you so much. That's so interesting. We hope you enjoyed the video, and we're going to pop up on the screen now a little bit of extra reading if you're a teacher or someone who's interested in learning more about these tokens. Great. Thank you so much, Mary.
Thank you.